Ricky Dillard and Clark Sheard had a bond that many in the gospel community admired. Their connection went beyond music. It was rooted in years of shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep love for ministry. Both were icons in their own right. Karen, known as the Queen of Gospel Vocals, and Ricky, famous for his powerful choir arrangements and passionate stage presence. Over the years, they were often seen together at gospel award shows, church events, and spiritual conferences. To the public, they appeared to be more than just colleagues. They looked like true friends who celebrated each other's success and stood by one another in faith. Whenever Ricky performed, Karen could be seen clapping and smiling in the front row. And when Karen took the stage, Ricky was known to praise her voice and presence openly, never hiding his admiration. They were often invited to collaborate on gospel projects, and younger artists looked up to them as examples of unity and grace in the gospel industry. Many even credited them for teaching the importance of teamwork, humility, and faith-driven artistry. From the outside, everything seemed perfect, a true representation of harmony and spiritual fellowship. But behind the lights and applause, things weren't always as perfect as they appeared. Unseen by fans and even some fellow artists, a quiet tension was building. Something unspoken was growing between the two gospel legends, something that would eventually shake the very foundation of their long-standing bond. Behind the polished image of unity in the gospel circles lay a simmering rivalry that few ever saw. In the hushed corridors of church events and private backstage gatherings, a subtle competition was taking shape, a quiet battle for recognition and influence that left a mark on both Ricky Dillard and Clark Sheard. Despite their public demeanor of respect and camaraderie, the reality was that the gospel industry was fiercely competitive, with every performance and award season bringing its own share of comparisons and criticisms. A few months back, in a private discussion among select church members, some comments began to circulate. It emerged that in an intimate closed-group conversation, Karen had made offhand remarks about Ricky's style, suggesting that his performances were overly dramatic and perhaps more about seeking attention than delivering true spiritual connection. Although these words were meant for only a few ears, the confidential conversation slowly leaked into the wider community, fanning the flames of gossip and casting a shadow on their friendship. Ricky, who had always believed in loyalty and forgiveness, chose to ignore the initial whispers, hoping that time would smooth over the discord. However, as more murmurs of dissent grew louder among the inner circles of the gospel community, the tension began to mount, revealing that beneath the surface of heartfelt performances and public smiles was a very human struggle of jealousy and unspoken competition. Ricky Dillard had always carried himself with grace. He was known not just for his powerful music, but also for his humility and silence in the face of rumors. For months, he kept quiet about the comments that were spreading. He prayed, he reflected, and he tried to let it go. But even the most patient hearts have a breaking point. That moment came during a gospel conference in Atlanta, where Ricky had just wrapped up a performance that moved the entire audience to tears. Afterward, as he was speaking with reporters backstage, a journalist asked a question that caught him off guard. "Ricky, how do you feel about the recent rumors regarding your relationship with Clark Sheard?" For a few seconds he paused. The smile faded from his face, and for the first time Ricky looked tired, not physically, but emotionally. He responded with calm but clear emotion in his voice. He said, "I stayed quiet for years because I wanted to protect what we had. But when someone speaks about you behind your back while pretending to support you in public, it hurts. I never expected that from someone I call the sister in Christ." That short response was enough to send shockwaves through the gospel world. It was the first time Ricky had publicly addressed the tension, and though he didn't name names or get aggressive, the message was loud and clear. His heart was heavy, and the pain in his words was impossible to ignore. That interview clip spread quickly online, and people began to realize that what they thought was just gossip might be something far more real. A few days after that emotional interview, Ricky Dillard did something no one expected. He went live on Instagram. Thousands of fans tuned in, thinking it would be a casual check-in or a message of encouragement. like he usually shared. But this time, Ricky looked different. Calm, composed, but with the sadness in his eyes that couldn't be hidden. He greeted everyone, took a deep breath, and began to speak, not in anger, not to create drama, but to finally tell his truth. He shared that for years, he had overlooked small things, whispers from mutual friends, subtle jabs during rehearsals, and changes in behavior that felt cold and calculated. But the final blow came when he found out that Karen had allegedly tried to block him from being nominated for a major gospel award. Ricky revealed that she had reached out to certain board members privately, claiming his style didn't represent true gospel and urging them to consider more traditional artists. That moment shattered the trust he had held onto for so long. He also mentioned how some of his choir members, people he had mentored and guided, were approached by Karen's team with offers to join her projects without his knowledge. And during one of their last collaborations, she had made a comment about his performance being too theatrical for the Lord, laughing it off as a joke, but Ricky said it stayed with him, not because of what was said, but because of who said it. Throughout the live, Ricky never raised his voice. His words weren't filled with bitterness, just honesty and heartbreak. "This is not about bringing anyone down," he said. "This is about freeing myself from years of quiet pain and letting people know that even in gospel music, not everything is what it seems." By the end of the live, comments flooded in, some in shock, some offering prayers, and many thanking him for his transparency. In that moment, Ricky wasn't just a gospel artist. He was a human being finally speaking his truth. The impact of Ricky Dillard's Instagram Live was immediate and intense. Within hours, clips of his emotional confession were circulating all over social media. Gospel fans, churchgoers, and even secular music followers were stunned. Many couldn't believe that two of the most respected figures in gospel music had been hiding so much behind their public smiles. People began sharing their own memories of Ricky and Karen, trying to piece together the moments they may have missed, the awkward interviews, the canceled joint performances, the polite but distant behavior. Suddenly, everything started to make sense to them. The gospel community quickly became divided. On one side were Karen's loyal supporters, defending her character and suggesting that Ricky may have misunderstood her intentions. They pointed out her decades of ministry, her role as a first lady, and her image as a woman of faith. On the other side were those who praised Ricky for his courage, calling his truth-telling an act of healing and honesty. They spoke about how the gospel industry often hides its problems behind scripture, and how Ricky's words were necessary to break that silence. The hashtags #RickySpeaksTruth, #GospelDrama, and #PrayForUnity began trending across platforms. Churches and gospel radio stations started discussing the matter openly. Some leaders even used it as a teaching moment, reminding their congregations that even spiritual leaders are human and face betrayal, disappointment, and pride just like anyone else. The shock wasn't just because of what was said, it was because the truth came from someone so deeply respected and known for staying silent in times of controversy. For many, it was a wake-up call. Behind the powerful choirs, the glamorous roads, and the moving songs, there were real people struggling with real emotions: jealousy, pride, pain, and the fear of being misunderstood. The gospel world was shaken, and nothing felt the same anymore. While the internet buzzed and gospel circles debated, Karen Clark Sheard remained silent. She didn't release a statement, didn't go live, and didn't directly address Ricky's claims. Days passed, and people kept waiting, some expecting a heartfelt apology, others waiting for her to deny everything. But instead of speaking directly, Karen posted a single photo on her Instagram. It was a picture of her standing in front of her church, dressed in white, with a soft smile on her face. The caption read, "When they go low, we worship high." The post sent a strong yet quiet message. It wasn't an attack, but it also wasn't an apology. It was the kind of response that left people guessing. Was she rising above the drama? Was she refusing to acknowledge something she believed was untrue? Or was it her way of throwing shade without saying a word? The comment section exploded. Her loyal fans filled it with support, quoting scriptures and praying for her strength. But others weren't so kind. They asked for answers. Despite the pressure, Karen said nothing more. She continued posting about her church, her family, and upcoming events, never once mentioning Ricky's name or the situation. It became clear that she had chosen to respond with silence, or perhaps with strategy. Whether it was wisdom or avoidance, only she knew. But one thing was certain, her quiet approach only added more fuel to the fire. People talked even more, speculations grew louder, and what could have been a short-lived controversy turned into a storm that refused to settle. As the days turned into weeks, the buzz around Ricky Dillard and Karen Clark Sheard's fallout slowly began to quiet down, but the effects lingered. Interviews, blog posts, and panel discussions continued to reflect on what had happened. Many gospel fans were left heartbroken, not just because two legends had parted ways, but because their story had exposed something deeper, the emotional toll of silence, the weight of competition, and the loneliness that can exist even among those who sing about love and unity. People who had once looked at gospel music as a space free from pride and politics began to realize that even sacred platforms can be touched by human flaws. In one of Ricky's later interviews, he offered a softer tone. He made it clear that his intention had never been to destroy Karen's name or reputation. "This was never about bringing anyone down," he said. "This was about freeing myself. I've been carrying years of pain quietly while being expected to smile and serve. I just couldn't do it anymore." His words resonated with many artists, especially those who had felt silenced or overlooked in similar situations. It wasn't about hate. It was about healing. Despite everything, Ricky never called for people to cancel Karen. Instead, he asked for prayers for himself, for Karen, and for the entire gospel community. "I still love her," he admitted. "That doesn't change overnight. But love doesn't mean you allow yourself to be wounded in silence." His honesty struck a chord with thousands, and slowly, people began shifting the conversation from blame to reflection. In the end, what started as a shocking revelation turned into something bigger, a moment of truth that forced the gospel world to confront its own hidden struggles. Ricky's courage to speak and Karen's choice to stay silent became symbols of two very different responses to conflict. But somewhere between those responses, a message was born. We must not only worship with our voices, but also heal with our hearts. As the storm settled and the public eye moved on to new headlines, what remained was a quiet void, one that made people think more deeply about the gospel world they admired. This wasn't just about Ricky and Karen anymore. Their story became a mirror reflecting the silent battles so many fight behind the scenes. It reminded everyone that even those who stand on pulpits or lead choirs are still human, flawed, emotional, and sometimes broken inside. They sing of peace while wrestling with pride. They preach forgiveness while quietly carrying hurt. And they praise unity while feeling isolated in the spotlight. For younger gospel artists watching from the sidelines, this moment became a lesson. Success should never come at the cost of peace, and silence isn't always strength. Sometimes telling your truth, even if it shakes the world around you, is the only way to protect your spirit. Ricky's courage to speak up may have shocked people, but it also gave permission to others who have kept their pain buried in silence for far too long. And Karen's silence, though criticized by some, also spoke volumes. It highlighted how difficult it is to face public accusations when your image, your faith, and your legacy are on the line. Whether her silence was protection, denial, or wisdom, no one truly knows. But what's clear is that even silence can hurt, especially when the people around you are begging for truth. At the end of the day, this wasn't a scandal. It was a story about wounds left unspoken, friendships stretched thin, and the complicated journey of serving God in a world that's watching your every move. Maybe reconciliation will come one day. Maybe it won't. But what matters most is the message it left behind. Real healing can only begin when honesty replaces performance, and when people in ministry remember that grace isn't just something we sing about. It's something we must live, even when it's hard.